Christie?
Okay.
Yep. I'd like to call to order this September 29th, 2020 special meeting of the Board of Education. Will you please call the roll?
Mr. Gomez?
Here.
Dr. Hall?
Here.
Ms. Moffitt?
Here.
Ms. Schofield?
Here.
Ms. White?
Here.
Item B, agenda. Motion to approve the agenda. It's recommended the Board of Education approve the agenda of the September 29th, 2020 special Board of Education
So
meeting.
moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Roll call, please.
Mr. Gomez?
Aye.
Dr. Hall?
Aye.
Ms. Moffitt?
Aye.
Ms. Schofield?
Aye.
Ms. White?
Aye.
Item C, opening ceremony. Welcome, our vision, Cuyahoga Falls City Schools, the hub of our community, committed to a culture of caring. We innovate, we create, we personalize education for all. Our mission, every student, every day, every opportunity. Item 2, informational items. This meeting is a meeting of the Cuyahoga Falls Board of Education in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business. It is not a public community meeting, although there are opportunities for public participation. If an individual wishes to address the board regarding a topic found on the meeting agenda, the individual must send an email to boemeeting@cfalls.org. Following the introduction of the topic by the board president, followed by board discussion, the individual's comment will be read. If an individual wishes to address the board regarding a topic not found on the meeting agenda, she or he must notify the superintendent and/or board president of the topic no later than 7 calendar days in advance of the meeting. The comments of these individuals will be read during the board business portion of the agenda. In both cases, comments will include the name and address of the individual and be limited to 3 minutes. In addition, in public session, the board will not hear complaints about school personnel nor against any person connected with the school system. An unabridged board agenda for this meeting can be found on your electronic device at the address as follows: www.boarddocs.com/oh/cfalls/board.nsf. The next regularly scheduled meeting can be of the Cuyahoga Falls Board of Education is on October 7th, 2020 at 6 p.m. in the Cuyahoga Falls High School Library, 2300 4th Street. And now for our Pledge of Allegiance, Ms. Patrice White.
If you will, stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. White. Item D, Board Business, OSBA Self-Evaluation. Cheryl Ryan, thank you for being with us. We're ready for you.
All right. Well, thank you for having me here at Cuyahoga Falls. It's been a little while since I was back, but it's awfully nice to see all of you. Normally, I would be expecting you in Columbus, a lot of you in Columbus in the next few weeks for our Capitol Conference. And I just want to say, this year, we're all virtual. We are getting very excited to host what we think is going to be a terrific conference, complete with lots of learning sessions and general session speakers. But the one thing I wanted to say to you is that our Student Achievement Fair, our Student Art Show, and our Student Performance Showcase this year virtually are all opportunities for your students to participate virtually. So if your band or choir instructors or orchestra or even marching band, if there's already a 2 or a 3 minute, we're accepting up to 3-minute clips of performances of students. If your art teachers have student art that they would like to upload, or again, if you have a student program you'd like to highlight, all of it will be virtual. Your teachers don't need to be, in person at the conference. And we would really love to have Cuyahoga Falls participation in one or more of those opportunities. So I did want to plug that.
Thank you.
Okay. So Anthony and I have talked a couple of times and about your willingness to do a board self-evaluation, your interest in doing board self-evaluation, which is kind of interesting timing with Alex's arrival on the board. I don't know too many times when you show up at a job and they tell you you're getting evaluated on your second week, but we're going to do that nonetheless. And actually, ironically, should give you a great foundation for your work as a board member. I hope you enjoy being a board member. I know I really enjoyed it, and I know all these long-term board members obviously have enjoyed it, serving the district as well. So the nice thing about this workshop is all of you can ask questions, and I hope that there will be discussion. I've tried to customize this to your strategic plan, and I'd just like to talk to you a little bit about your role in making that plan come to life. So, first of all, we know it's an Ohio mandate that we evaluate our superintendents and our treasurers. It is not a mandate that we evaluate the board. So, not a lot of boards do it. By the way, before I forget what not a lot of boards do, President Schofield, when you read your vision and mission, I just wanted to jump out of my chair and just be like this, because that does not happen a lot when I'm at board meetings. It happens actually very rarely. Many boards have a vision and a mission, not enough, but many. But you don't hear it at board meetings. So fabulous, and kudos for that. But self-evaluation does improve accountability, right? Because you're saying to your community tonight, and you're streaming live, that we care about being a high-functioning board. We care about what we're saying to our community, and we care about the actions that we're taking being transparent and in the best interest of our students. It improves communication. We're obviously talking tonight. We're streaming this. We're going to talk about ways for you to better communicate what it is you're doing to your community. And it helps you in decision making. And we're going to talk a lot about that. So it's the self-evaluation is basically a tool to force you to pay attention to your strategic plan. So what we don't want is for you to have a strategic plan that, is, and I'm not going to say decoration, because most of them aren't decoration, but that the self-evaluation is just another tool that will help you internalize that strategic plan and make it very, very real to all of you as board members. It does help you identify where you are, where you still have progress to make, and some trends for you. And thanks to all of you that returned the questions that I sent to you, because you were all pretty much on the same page about those. It does promote good public relationships and culture, right? So you're evaluating your superintendent and your treasurer on an annual basis, and we're going to talk just a little bit about that tonight. I have just a couple of slides. But again, if I'm asking for my public's vote, and we're certainly asking for our taxpayers to participate in our school community, then they want to know that you're doing what you said you were going to do, and you're doing what they elected you to do. You're role models. So it starts with the board, and it goes to then Superintendent Nichols's cabinet or executive committee, whatever he calls that high-level central office group, and it rolls down to principals and their meetings, et cetera. It really helps educate you about what's going on in your district. So there will be times this evening that I'll probably refer to your superintendent and ask him to provide some information about something that maybe you have a question about or I have a question about. But it helps you ask the right questions. We're going to do a series of training next year that basically has evolved out of a group of treasurers said, my gosh, these are the questions I wish my board members would ask me. This is the data I wish my board members cared about. And board members ask me all the time, this is the data that I care about. I wish the superintendent and treasurer were sharing this kind of stuff with me. So it also educates community members about alignment. It helps them understand that you're doing what you say you're going to do. So, as you said, the vision for Cuyahoga Falls City Schools, the hub of our community committed to a culture of caring. We innovate, we create, we personalize education for all. It's awesome. I really like that. And that's going to be, should be front and center, just as you made it at the beginning of your meeting, but not just lip service, right? So that's what we're going to base your board self-evaluation conversation around. So this is basically what the law says your role is. Your role is to set goals for the district in collaboration with administrators, teachers, your basic community members, and then to monitor progress. The buck does stop with you. Your job is to monitor progress on what is going on. But in order to fairly monitor that progress, you need to have evidence and you need to have data. And you need to not need to rely on anecdote or minority opinion or anything else, or even your own hunches. You need to have good data to understand. And that is the measurable strategies that come out of your focus areas. Your role is to assure that the goals remain the overriding priority of the Board of Education. So what I'm going to ask you in a nutshell, we're going to talk for a couple of hours, but basically in a nutshell, what I'm going to ask you to do is to frame every conversation and every decision around your 4 focus areas that you've said are important to this district, right? So everything you do and everything you ask your superintendent and treasurer to do, and frankly, everything they ask their staff to do, should be framed around those 4 focus areas. So these are those areas: student success, culture of caring, Black Tiger family, and resource leveraging. Am I correct?
Correct.
So now I want to ask you, what was this board's role, minus Dr. Hall here, I guess, in creating these? And when the strategic plan was renewed, revitalized, created, did all of you participate? And what was your role in defining these focus areas? So share a little bit about that with me.
We met with community members, we met with staff members, we met even with students together to develop a strategic plan. We had a few sessions where we worked together to formulate what we thought the goals should be for our district. And by receiving input from all of them, we were able to come up with what you see in front of us that we felt were not only priority, but I hate to use the word doable, but something that could be achieved, because you hate to set unrealistic goals for your district or for yourself or for your students, for anyone. And we felt these were very important for our district.
How long ago did that happen?
Last year.
Last year, just last year. Okay.
Just starting our 2nd year of the 5-year plan.
And when you talked about it, did you talk about, did you leave the work at the focus areas and the bullet points that followed those, meaning what it would say if you were actually able to achieve student success, what student success mean? Is that where the board left off, or did the board get involved in sort of what I would call in the weeds work with specific measurable projects? No. Okay. So again, you use the word, Kathy, about vision and I'm not remembering your exact words now, but about aspirational. You want goals that you can shoot for, but that you want something that's realistic also. So one of the things I like about your vision is that I can't imagine we'll get to the end of 2 or 3 or 4 years from now and you'll tell me that we've done everything we need to do in this area. There's always going to be something more you can innovate, that you can create. And your goal of being everything to every student is a fabulous goal, but it's a really hard one to meet, right? So, so within these focus areas, this is what I found on your website, which, by the way, good for you. Your strategic plan is super easy to find on the website. Provide applied hands-on learning in STEAM. So there's 5 bullet points there that are really important to all of you. And those also came about through the community work that you talked about. Todd, where is the district right now in terms of specific strategies? So for example, if we look at bullet 3 on personalized career exploration,
Mhm.
tell me a little bit about the structure for making this kind of stuff happen. Are there committees? Are there
Mhm.
groups that are, do you have a group that's in charge of student success? How is that all
Okay.
working?
So the process in terms of goal setting on an annual basis is taking a look at our strategic plan. Starts with our administrative team, administrative council, and take a look at the strategic plan and identify those that have the current timeline associated therewith. Take those individual pieces and then start to build the SMART goals based off of those pieces. Then bring them, once we're done, and that's usually done at an end of the year retreat. I mean, we review previous year's work and start on the next year's work based on that strategic plan. And then we bring what the administrative council did in June to the Board of Education in July. They have an opportunity to vet it. We present it, so on and so forth. They give us feedback. And then in my opening year administrative council meeting in August, we take their feedback, take what we created, and we refine them for the current year in terms of goals. Now, if you want to get into the specifics with regard to the third bullet point, every single one, we have 9 buildings, 6 elementary buildings. They all have career activities within their buildings. And then as we transition into 6 through 12, we're specifically using Naviance. That's one of our goals this year is we have been using Naviance, but we want to make a better use of Naviance and build a real portfolio from the students' 6th grade year to their 12th grade year by having them do specific projects, having all of our students do specific projects within Naviance so that through that continuum and upon their graduation, they have that portfolio.
Thank you.
I also have a group that's called Alliance for School and Community Growth that meets the second Tuesday of every month. That is probably 70 members strong at this point. Not all of them meet all of the time, but it's largely Chamber of Commerce, local businesses, City of Cuyahoga Falls, the universities, Kent State, University of Akron, Stark State is a key player for us as well. And in that, they help us with the BAC BOE plan that we have to submit. And so you'll see aspects of that BAC BOE plan in terms of internships and pieces that are specifically related to employment, enlistment, and enrollment.
Thank you. So each of these bullets, as he referred to the SMART goals, the administrative team, the teachers and staff have defined a set of achievable SMART strategies within each of those bullets. And some of those are rolling out now, and some of those will roll out over the next, you said it's a 5-year plan, is that right?
It is a 5-year plan, that's correct.
So the board should be focusing its conversations on student success or one of these other focus areas. Where I hope that the board can have a conversation annually about the time that he's going to meet with administrators and teachers about what strategies got accomplished last year, what's rolling up, what do we want to focus on this year. I would love it if the board and the superintendent could have a conversation about the priorities. We'll talk that a little bit about that either. So a lot of times boards will tell superintendents, work the plan, work the plan, work the plan, and the superintendent works the plan, but the board's priorities might have been slightly different than the superintendent's, and we want to make sure you're all on the same page.
About mid-year, we come together and I do a mid-year document. All my administrators and staff members do quarterly updates based on on their goals. And so at mid-year, I share that with the Board of Education. So they provide input at mid-year. And then at the end of the year, I put together an end of the year document that we go through thoroughly. Thoroughly. And so that's part of our process.
And are you aligning administrator and teacher and principal goals to the 4 focus areas?
Oh, yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Good.
We're doing something a little different this year. I mean, I had them each create like 3 to 4 goals off of what we had created district-wide, and it was really cumbersome and big. And so what we're doing a little differently this year is we created district goals, and then they're doing action steps underneath those goals. So
Good.
we'll see how that goes.
Perfect.
I was hoping someone else would interject so I don't keep talking, but it's a discussion that we just had within
Sure.
the last 2 board meetings, because we looked at the strategic plan and we thought in this COVID area, it might be a bit overwhelming if we tried to tackle the entity of it. So we did establish priorities. We discussed as a board with our administration what we wanted to focus on. So that happened within the last month, am I correct?
And I'm really glad that you brought up in the COVID era, because as far as I'm concerned, the COVID pandemic should not be a reason to divert from the strategic plan. It should be a reason to stick closer to it, right? Because I think that there is probably, I love your 4 focus areas because they're broad. They cover the student experience, the staff experience, the community experience, and certainly the tax and financial experience. So they're very, very broad. So there's not much that you're going to be able to do as a board or as an administration that wouldn't affect one or more of those focus areas, which is exactly the point. That's awesome. But so culture of caring here, you had 4 distinct areas where you're hoping that the SMART goals, the specific measurables, the priorities of staff will touch one or more of those 4 bullets there. So black ties or family, positive messaging about the district, having families in your buildings, foster a culture of community service. I think the board has a lot to say here. And the board has, this is probably the area, I would say these 2 areas, well, all 4 of them, but this one and this one. And we're going to talk a little bit more about the messages you gave me, but I would say that there's a lot that you feel as a board where your gaps really are in terms of your governance falls into the communications kind of area. And I see that falling into this focus area here. Also this one. We all know that school finance is really complicated, and I'm what I would say, I'm editorializing here, unfair, right, in a lot of ways. And the state doesn't provide the kind of resources that we all wish it did to our districts. But your job as a board is to share that story and to do all you can to let your community know about the real situation and the hoped for situation. And I like your bullets here because the third one particularly is let's continue to be as creative as we can be about what is out there. If there's a grant that's available or something else, let's make sure our staff know about it and can chase it. And the first one is, this is really truly, along with your treasurer and your superintendent, this is where the board can certainly play a huge role, is in developing ways to help your community understand the educational situation that your district is in. So, since these 4 focus areas or goals were created, what specific discussions do you have at board meetings connected to these focus areas? So my question here is, does your board agenda, other than reading your vision, which again is awesome, does your board agenda specifically address your focus areas? So where you have new business, board business, old business, that kind of thing. Are these 4 focus areas talked about in any way in terms of your agenda itself?
Karen, you want to take that one?
So once we approved our goals for this year, then we start to have our board meetings, which are 2 times a month. When we build our agenda, as we look at each item, we align it with one of those 4 focus areas.
Perfect.
On the agenda, you'll see the item and then where it connects to the strategic plan.
Awesome. That's terrific. A+. Yeah, that's great. What specific improvements would the board say have been most prominent? So since you created this strategic plan, whether it's an actual measurable that's been achieved or something in your governance, is there anything that you've noticed improvement in as a result of having iterated these 4 focus areas? And I'd open that up to treasurer or superintendent as well.
If I may, I don't want to speak too much, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give kudos to our Board of Education because they've come together. Really, I think the strategic plan and the process and a number of things that we've gone through with regard to that strategic plan and the process, they've really come together. And they all carry different ideas and different opinions and those kinds of things, but we've been able to express those different ideas, different opinions, but then ultimately work as a team, the 5 board members, the treasurer and myself. And that has been really refreshing because not all boards, as you know,
Sure.
operate as seamlessly as this board is currently operating and has for, a while.
So a strategic plan can often serve as a board development opportunity, and it sounds like maybe some of that happened for you when you went through the process. The best way for a board to be high functioning and to stay high functioning is to do it through that concerted effort to stay within your strategic plan.
I think of the 4 areas for a long time, the only thing we felt like we could focus on was resource leveraging because there were so many things we wanted to do, but the resources weren't there. So it was like, what can we do within this very small bucket of available funds that we have? And we've worked very hard on that, and we're in a much better place financially. So I think as a board, we've shifted more to the student success piece.
And isn't that
Okay.
exciting?
Well, I mean, it's what we all wanted to do in the
Right.
first place. I think we all said that, so we've had that opportunity because we've done so much work on the financial piece to shift our focus over to the student success piece and try to drive more on that. And that's been our focus, which is what our focus should be. I think we all agree. Student achievement's the core of our work.
Right, and you hope that it's kind of a wheel, that when you can focus on student success and put some resources there, achievement goes up, students are happier, more competitive, parents are happier, and that continued support from the community is easier to get when you do need it. I wish I could tell you your financial troubles are probably over forever, but we all know that that's probably not the case either. So what has the board seen prior to COVID related to the strategic plan? Has there been any hangups? Have there been any challenges for you in terms of communicating it to neighbors and friends or among yourselves, or do you feel so far like it's been implementing itself pretty well? Any challenges?
I think part of the problem, Cheryl, is that we just got the strategic plan launched and then COVID hit. And I know that you want to address things outside of that, but I thought it was working very effectively. And then
How about since COVID?
since COVID, everything has really had to, I guess, be prioritized because we needed to decide how we were going to deliver instruction. And when we came up with the thought as a system that we would do hybrid and virtual, that forces a lot of changes with staffing, with instruction, with a lot of different things. And so it has impacted the way this is moving forward, but hopefully temporarily, because I think everyone had to step back and determine how we were going to do this with a fairly smooth transition. But there are problems, there are glitches that interfere with.
Of course there are. None of us ever have been through anything like this before.
Exactly. Every student, every day, every opportunity is a little more of a challenge because we are teaching a bit differently and we aren't interfacing with the kids personally. if
Sure.
you will.
But think a little bit about COVID and how we've all had to pivot. I guess that's the new trendiest word for business people to use in this era of the pandemic. Student success, certainly every decision you and your administrators have made related to COVID has been about how can we maintain student success? How can we help students with the resources they need? Your culture of caring, your Black Tiger family, and your resource leveraging, all of those goals, I think, have been probably intrinsically connected to almost every action you've taken related to COVID. So I do hope that you're able to marshal and record your progress. And there are probably a lot of smart strategies that you've implemented tied directly to your goals that weren't on your original list, right? Probably a lot related to technology
Well,
that
yeah,
you weren't going to be, having to futz with maybe immediately.
Ryan will tell you that there's a number of things that we've done in 2 weeks that would have taken a year.
I mean, think about just feeding students. I'm sure your community, like so many others, tackled how are we going to feed students? How are we going to make sure that our students that really rely on school meals continue to be able to eat and that kind of thing. So yeah, I mean, strategic plan more important now than ever before. And how really fortunate were you that you had this new plan to work off of?
I think one of the things that we could do more is celebrate when we achieve a goal in the strategic plan, because the strategic plan was very much what the community wanted. They met with so many community members, and then we put our stamp as the board says we can live with this. But it wasn't just us saying, what do we want to do in 5 years? The community told us. And there were pieces in there that we perhaps, the 5 of us, wouldn't have put in there were it not for the community. And
Sure.
And that's great. But I think then we don't always, like when we hired John Wazelko to be community relations, did we tie that to the fact that this was a goal the community gave us, that they wanted somebody to do community relations? Or when we created our definition of STEAM, did we celebrate the fact that that was a goal that the community wanted us to do? So I think there's that. It's that communication bridge. Where
There you go.
I think
And so
telling the community, hey, you gave us this thing that you wanted us to do, and we did it because you said you wanted it, and this is a value that you have for your school.
learn to say that just like you did right now at your board meeting. So when you are actually approving the contract for your new communications person, you say, as everybody knows, the strategic plan in Cuyahoga Falls, communication is really important. It factors into our culture of caring and our focus area on Black Tiger family. And so, as a result, from the community's saying so, this project has happened. When the STEAM project happens, or anything with, you find out from your superintendent that your buildings and grounds person was able to, get a grant from Scott's Lawn or whatever it is. One of our focus areas is leveraging resources. And we said specifically that finding new money was really critical, and that was important to our community. And so I applaud, blah, blah, blah. So if you can learn to just, it sounds cheesy sometimes, I think, but it really isn't. And if you can put it in those kinds of terms, that's what not only makes it real for your community, but real for you. So I really appreciate what you just said, because that's exactly what you need to do. You need to learn to applaud yourselves and your administrators and staff too. So these are the 5 standards that OSBA uses for board self-assessment. Responsible school governance, and that breaks down a little bit more. Communication of and commitment to high expectations. Creation of district-wide conditions for student and staff success, accountability, and engagement of community members. So a lot of these are directly also tied to your strategic plan. So if you do well in these areas of board self-assessment, these 5 objectives, it will be because you are paying attention to your strategic plan. So the first one is governance, and that's the big one, because you are the governors for your school district. And we have broken that down recently into 6 leadership areas. And the first one is vision. So it's establish and pay attention to a vision. You've done that. So A+, right? All you have to do is stay with it. And sometimes it's easy as a board to, what does the grandmother say about taking the pathway? You know, getting off the road and taking some weird pathway. It's really easy to have that happen, particularly when crisis strikes. And as you've had to make decisions about allocating resources just for COVID, I was in a district, I was telling your superintendent, I was in a district last night and I had a tour of the high school and saw how they've, put up the plastic and all that kind of thing to help kids with social distancing and all that. And I thought, oh my gosh, just the money that has been spent in just, preparing our district. So you have had a vision and you are sticking to your vision. So that's good. But you have to continue to understand that your role as a Board of Education is to make that vision statement that your board president read at the beginning of the meeting real. And that's your job. Your job is to ensure accountability. So when I talked a little earlier about asking the right questions, it would be great if after every decision, or certainly every big decision, one of you said, how will we know? What is the data? You look at your superintendent and you say, what is the data that you expect will be generated when we put this decision into motion? When we hire our communications coordinator, how will we know that he or she, is it he? He. How will we know that, not that he's doing a good job, but that his work is resulting in a payoff for us? Well, it might be Twitter followers. It might be stories in the newspaper. Whatever that measure is. A good thing for the board to say is, how will we be evaluating that service that he's providing? Accountability in all things, right? You need to be a good advocate for public education. So we have board members across the state of Ohio that do not have children in the schools, or have their children even in private schools or homeschools. And they join the board for various reasons. But for the most part, we have board members who either have children in the schools or had children in the schools and now maybe have grandchildren in the schools. But we hope you will be a huge advocate for public education. And there are little ways to do that, and there are big ways to do that. But that's a big part of board self-assessment. Adhere to policy. I know you've all just been through, a major policy shift, and I'm excited about that. And I think that it's going to be a really good thing for you. But adhering to it. So I don't know how many times board members will call me and they'll have a problem about something, or they'll wonder about something. The latest thing is, this whole virtual, when do we have to be back all together, and how can we continue to work virtually if one or two of us wants to be virtual, and, what does your policy say? It's always about referring to your policy, and there is almost always a policy for most things. Sometimes it's a practice, but most often it's policy. Your job is to promote healthy relationships, and that's something that you all said to me in your responses to me, that you think you have some room to grow still. Probably all of us have room to grow there. But relationships need to be good between board members. They need to be great between board members and your 2 key administrators, and they need to be great with the community. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And you need to work as a team. So the community engagement thing will happen well when all of you move forward as a group. When you're able to, all the time, ideally, but almost all the time for sure, abide by the majority opinion as voted on by the board. So, how well do you believe you do with respect to this standard of governance? So most of you overall graded yourself 2 or 3. When I asked the question, I said on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel you're doing? I think several of you gave a 2 and one or two people gave a 3. But specifically as it relates to governance, it sounds to me like you all are doing a pretty good job and you'd give yourself that 2 on the 1 to 5 scale. Any thoughts there? Most of you said you thought you were doing a great job in policy. So obviously. And I think 1 or 2 of you said that you thought you were pretty good advocates. Who's your legislative liaison? Are you also the delegate at the business meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So the second standard is communication and commitment to high expectations. So articulate the conviction that all students can learn. We all have to believe all students can learn. We all have to believe that there is a good place in our district for every student, not just a place, but a good place for every student in our district, regardless of their personal background, challenges, or anything else. This is probably a lot where some of the work that many of our districts are doing in the area of diversity and equity are focusing, and it's important work to do. So people in your community will need to believe that you believe that all students can learn, and that's a part of your vision statement or your mission statement. Every student, every day, something to that effect. Lead the development of a vision of learning, including goals, mission, objectives. You've done that. Adopt collaboratively developed district plans to achieve your goals with your superintendent. You've done that. And ensure establishment of non-negotiable goals for students aligned to these plans. So I'm assuming it all rolls downhill, and you said that that's being done in your buildings. So here's something I wanted to give with you. Does the board summarize the discussions at the end of their meeting and agree on key messages? So one of the things that I always like to leave a board is this hint. So Karen, you have a discussion, you make a motion, it's seconded by Kathy. There's active discussion. Alex asks some questions. Anthony chimes in. Patty says something. And it goes on for 4 or 5 minutes. Probably a majority of your conversations don't have that kind of extended conversation, but occasionally there will be something on your agenda that does. Maybe your superintendent provides some of the data that you've asked him to provide, or the treasurer shares a report on something. What I would like it doesn't have to be board president, quite often it is if somebody says at the end of that discussion, we've heard Anthony offered some interesting stuff and Kathy had a great point. Maybe you look to your superintendent and you ask him, if we as a board, we're going to take one message from this conversation out into our community over the next 2 weeks before our next meeting, what would it be? What is the one bullet point or the 2 bullet points that if all of us were sharing that would be a good thing for the district? Because what Alex sees as the important nugget from that conversation might be very different from what Karen sees. And it's speaking, from the same hymnal, I guess. And that's really important. It's an easy thing to do, particularly if you're talking about a complicated subject. If Todd brings to the next board meeting a report about how it's been since your students all came back to the buildings on Monday, and he has a list of 9 things that happened and different priorities that are being addressed and the challenges that are presenting themselves, it'll be easy for you all to go back to your neighbors and say, God, we had a 20-minute conversation about the first week back of physical school. But if you all looked at him and said, what are the 1 or 2 things that we should really be sharing with people? And how is it tied to our 4 focus areas? That's a great message for you that'll help you in your communications efforts. What does the board do to consistently share the message of the district's strategic plan in the community? So, it's the same kind of point. And when somebody walks up to you at Kroger and says, I really appreciate that Teacher Jones, I understand Teacher Jones is starting a food drive for the pantry. And I think it's a great idea. And, I participated in that, whatever. Learn to say, thank you for that support. And the strategic plan the community set this board on really has a focus on that caring and on being a family. And so I really appreciate your support. Just really learn to speak in terms of those 4 focus areas. So the third standard is the creation of conditions for student success. And as Anthony said, that's been a frustration for you because you haven't had that luxury. Imagine it being a luxury to provide all students with what they need to succeed in a public school district. So safety and security is in there. And you are mandated as a district to have an emergency plan and lots of security plans. Do you as a board on an annual basis get a report on those plans or review those plans?
No.
Not
No, you
We
don't.
chose not to.
The safety plans that are submitted to the state for each school?
Right.
No.
No, we don't.
Okay. I think it's a topic that you should at least touch on at a board meeting annually, even if it's just a report from you about changes to the plans or you don't obviously want to give a lot of specifics a lot of times. But if you can just note for the board that the plans have been updated or that they've been reviewed and updates have been submitted. Employ and support quality staff for their PD. PD took a hit this year, right? Because budgets took a hit. But PD is really important. I was so pleased that we saw all across the country lots of opportunities for teachers to do free PD and to do a lot of things virtually and to do free. And I would highly encourage your board to continue to support PD in whatever way, shape, and form you can do so.
PD was very different since March. It's been there. But it's very, very different form and it involves a lot more people. For example, Bass's, weekly list of meetings, if you're in this particular group, and meeting across the state, that stuff didn't exist
Yeah.
prior to this. So there are some silver linings.
There are,
And
for
so PD just took a very, very different form. It was there and might not have been as targeted to, specific topics, but there was a lot of opportunities for a lot of people to meet new people across the state.
Absolutely. I think I heard somebody say that they feel much more connected from a network perspective now than they did prior to COVID, and I think that's true. But asking as a board, asking questions about the PD that's taking place for staff. We know when you're talking about a particular project, make sure you ask a question about what specific training or professional development did the staff member have to get in order to do that, so that it's another kudo, it's something else you can applaud. Ensure the right management. You're asking your superintendent to make sure the right bodies are in place to enact each of your goals and monitor the district budget to support learning in the strategic plan. So the fact that you have a resources goal in your strategic plan, I know it's not something that you want to be the center all the time of your conversations, but clearly aligning your resources, putting your money where your mouth is really important. All right. How well do you think the board does at focusing meeting conversations around aspects of student achievement? How much of your board agenda is about the student success, do you think? As opposed to operations, as opposed to transportation, food service, finances, IT in and of itself. Would you tell me 20% of your items have to do with things connected to this? 40%?
I'd say more than that, actually. We've moved to consent agenda on a lot of items that we don't need much discussion about. We received information on them in advance and have an opportunity to clarify any questions we have so that we can move through those more rapidly. And what we've done instead is reallocate our board time to hearing presentations from mostly curriculum and instruction people. And that we uniformly, universally, and unilaterally agree that that's the most important work we can hear about. So probably every board meeting, or pretty close to every board meeting, we hear about something in
Good.
curriculum, in parent conferencing, in technology integration, something that's going to impact student success.
I'm just curious, those presentations, is it a push or a pull? So does the board say, when you're sitting down and you're talking about your board agenda for the next month or the next 2 months,
Right.
and what is the organic process by which the high school ceramics teacher might appear in front of you? I mean, do you let your board president know that it's time for so-and-so to make a presentation, or does the board say, we'd like to hear from?
That's
Okay.
pretty, yeah,
Okay.
the board pretty much says.
Good.
You know, we just saw a great article about our high school ceramics teacher doing a project with our downtown partnership. We'd like her to present at our next board meeting.
Good. So it comes from the board, which is how I like to see it. Now, I also want the superintendent to be able to say, you may not know that this is happening in the 4th grade classes, and I'd really like you to hear something about it. So it needs to go both ways, but I'm glad to hear that at least part of the time the board is saying we'd certainly like to hear more from so-and-so teacher. That's
Well,
great.
you talked about some conversations, and that is often how it is generated. It's through conversations. Well, tell me more about that, whatever that might be. And so, okay, we can do that next board meeting.
You're drafting your board agendas.
Mhm.
Do you have a personal face-to-face meeting, or do you have a phone conversation? Face-to-face? Just you and superintendent and treasurer, or vice president also?
Me, the superintendent, treasurer, the cabinet, and a rotating member of the board every time.
Good, cool.
We have future agenda items as an agenda item at every board meeting. So that's where a lot of those presentation ideas will come up. You know, Ms. Moffett might be, as she did say, hey, I've been thinking about, we're doing this online learning for 4 weeks. Can we have a presentation that talks about what that looks like? How is it different? What's working? And then we get a presentation about that. So
That's great.
those things that are on our minds, and we say, I'd like to know more about XYZ, and then we'll say, hey, Dr. Nichols, when do you think that could fit in? Because it's not always in 2 weeks at the next meeting
Sure.
that fits really, or that gives people enough time to really thoughtfully put something together.
Good.
One thing that I will admit that I've always had a yearning for and hope to see happen is having classroom teachers maybe approach us or come to us and say, hey, this is going on in my classroom, and I would really like the community to know more about it, because we've got so many dynamic, awesome things happening in instruction and with the kids even, that even if we have our communication person, he's not always able to know what each of these teachers are doing in their classroom. And I think too often they don't give themselves kudos enough to say, this is really out of the box, and look what my kids are learning, and I never thought this would have been possible. Why don't we take it to the public? So I'm hoping that we can maybe see a little bit more of that so that our public becomes more aware of what's happening in our schools. I think too often they only see it from their ones. Many times, what's happening in their school with their kids, or what they might hear from someone across town. But it would be nice if we could showcase some of the things that are happening on a fairly regular basis that just bring attention to the staff, the students, to say bravo for you.
Do you, Dr. Nichols, do you have a regular, like, email that you send to the board that's kind of a newsy thing? And I'm gathering that you probably go to principals and do you ask for news items or bullet points that they would want the board to hear about?
So every week I have a CCR meeting, which is our college career readiness team. That's pretty comprehensive. And then I also have a cabinet meeting. And so every week the board members get information from both of those meetings, pretty comprehensive information. I mean, their notes are usually, I don't know,
They're
10 to
very
14 pages long every week. And
So-
so it's pretty
They're very good.
comprehensive.
So that might be a process by which a principal could say, or if there are any of your teachers or if any of you teachers are having particular success in a certain area or something. But I'm trying to, maybe a conversation at a board meeting, Kathy, is just what are the processes that are already in place within the district where that kind of might bubble up?
Well, you mentioned, and I have the perfect, again, I really just need to shut up.
No,
but-
that's okay. No.
But, I mean, out of the strategic plan and then out of this year's goals came doing our star awards instead of having a year-end celebration, that kind of a thing, to do it on an ongoing basis where our staff nominates other staff members and then we recognize them at one of our board meetings, and if at all possible, recognize them in front of our top tigers, our kids, and so we have plenty of nominations at our meeting today. Brian, did she say 20? We have 20 nominations already that we can fill board agendas going forward with our staff members that have been nominated by our staff members that we'll then recognize in front of the kids in the community. So that's happening. And where did it come from? Strategic plan.
So,
Well, I think you raised an interesting thought, Kathy, because I think just to broaden it a little more, like even building wise, like how often do we know like about that great thing that happened at Bullock or at
Right.
Roberts? That maybe we should create some way that they can funnel that information to us. Like if during the course of a week something great happened at Preston, Tammy can send, hey, can you let the board know that in your notes? I think
Back in
That's
the old days, and since I think I'm probably the oldest in the room, but in the old days, we used to get copies of what were school newsletters. If you remember
Oh,
these
yeah.
old times of each building would have a newsletter that would go home to parents, maybe every week, every 2 weeks, whatever.
sure.
And in the newsletter would be a lot of those features.
Right.
Mrs. Smith's class raised $2,000 on jump rope for your heart this week, or don't forget all that stuff. And you'd hear the bits and pieces about everyday school from that. Well, newsletters, like the paper things that went home on Friday, are, antiquated, and it went digital to parents were getting online newsletters, so to speak. Same information, but just not in paper format. Since then, though, I don't know about any of that communication. If that in fact still happens, if principals send newsletters to parents, or whether it's more a Facebook page post now or whatever, not being on Facebook, that avenue's closed to me in terms of finding that out. And I think that's something we probably should be thinking about addressing.
Sure.
Because not every parent in our district has a Facebook account nor wants one. And if that's the only way to know about those building things, we may want to take a look at communication strategies in that regard.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit specifically, but just because something Todd was, or you were saying, it was you or Dr. Nichols was saying, got me thinking about how, again, before COVID, when we all had back to school nights, hopefully we will have back to school nights again at some point. And I was working with the district on a treasurer search last year, and they took their back to school night, and I thought it was a fabulous idea. and they basically repurposed it. And they brought in anybody that was sort of empty nest, retired, assisted living type caliber taxpayer citizen in their community. And they created a back to school night just for those people. And they had all the teachers there, and they were in their classroom, and people could walk through, and we're like, these are people that really want to know what's going on in the school. They would like to be able to volunteer if teachers need volunteers. And the superintendent there told me, gosh, we got all kinds of people signed up to, come in and read to our preschool kids. And we found out that we have retired doctors and retired plumbers and whatever that are willing to mentor kids. And it was a great thing. And it's kind of along the same line that you were talking about. But we're going to talk specifically about some of those kinds of ideas. So we've been talking a little bit about this already. What are the ways the district shares its student achievement updates with the board? So outside of the report card, forgetting the report card for a minute, which we all have to deal with still, or at least had to deal with. I don't know what form it'll be back in. But how do you regularly hear about your student achievement updates? Is it through those conversations with staff that you've been telling me about? How does the treasurer report? Does the treasurer report any kind of student achievement data tied to the budget specifically, or how do you, Dr. Nichols?
Christy, you want to handle that?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely components to my monthly reports that discuss student data. Our big topic now is open enrollment, given COVID and those figures. So really based off the state's foundation statement and how that goes into the monthly reports and our monthly totals and everything. We definitely discuss any major changes, negative or positive, to those figures.
Okay.
And your question to me was?
Same thing, specifically related to student achievement. Are there particular places in your board agenda where you address data that does or doesn't end up in the report card for the board?
And in the board notes, more so than in the board agenda, we have had our CCR team, our curriculum folks, come in and share with the board what some of our student data might be through MAP or some of our local assessments.
Okay.
So we have had those situations, but most of my reporting to the board in terms of the student achievement data is through my Friday notes.
Okay. What are the ways the board stays informed about buildings and technology? Well, you're probably really informed about technology, but how about the physical health and the status of your operational facilities?
I think that's a good Christie question again. She just finished a presentation for us on our emergency levy, which has many components built in on keeping our buildings running smoothly with the roofs, windows, boilers, parking lots, and so on. Christie, why don't you jump on that one too?
Yeah, so we have our emergency levy fund that was passed in 2017 separate. So it's its own separate fund, so we can keep track of that. Previous to my time there was an original plan built specifying what kind of items would be purchased with this money if the levy were to be passed. A lot of them revolve around building improvements, different deteriorating buildings. Technology was a big component of it, and textbook adoption. So every year, we kind of detail at a board meeting exactly what was spent. We have changed the plan before. So this past January, we did a mid-year review, and we also did an update to the plan based on the fact that we got the passage of the bond issue, which will now build the new 612 building. So some things may not have been as important on that plan as they are now, and vice versa. We took the time to update that and kind of put that forward of where our current needs were in relation to buildings and technology. And then we report every year on exactly what we did spend, and if we went over the allowed amount or the approximate amount that we said, or if we saved money in the scenario, and any details that go along with it. If we've had parking lots where we thought it was going to be one thing, and it turns out we've had to dig the whole thing up and basically start from scratch, and that's not what we anticipated. So we really detail it out and present it usually in the beginning of the school year.
Yeah, in fact, we take a look at it, every 6 months or so, and Christy does a really great job of it's right on our front page of our website. So any community member can see it. And as Christy said, we've had to adjust that plan certainly as we've progressed. We put it together as a 5-year plan, and not everything stays as it was at the beginning of the plan. So so at cabinet level, we discuss that regularly in terms of emergency levying, where we are in different projects, reported out to the board on a weekly basis, and then a formal presentation here to the board on at least an annual basis.
Good.
Todd's notes are very thorough. I mean, they're broken down by professional development, curriculum, technology, building and the grounds, and exactly, what everything is being done and going on or trying to be done. But they're very detailed, and we're lucky to have that every Friday come to us. Really keeps us informed.
We even know when refrigerators are out.
Yeah.
In a certain building. I mean, they're that
I'll tell you
detailed.
the cooler that's broken at Richardson.
We're very blessed that way.
Yes.
Yep.
Well, I don't know if that's a blessing or not. But
Well,
Well,
it is a wonderful tool if someone is saying, I'm wondering where my taxes are going, and you can say, well, I think you might have just purchased a cooler at the high school.
Boiler.
Because they don't always understand that component of tax, of where their taxes go.
Sure.
They think,
which, let me ask you this question. So when you have had to have a levy on the ballot or a renewal, which you all are real familiar with those things, do you believe that this board is good at iterating to the community, specifically what you said? If we get a yes vote on this renewal, this is what we will able to continue doing. And if we don't get a yes vote, this is what will probably have to be sacrificed?
I think that's probably been a board responsibility since day one. Because really, we're never in a place that we can go for any length of time without some kind of renewal or new levy, because school finance is complicated. And what
Sure.
people understand of it isn't always necessarily the bits and pieces that they need to understand to know why we might be asking for more money. So I think Dr. Nichols and our treasurers have done a wonderful job of keeping our community informed and trying to explain to them why this is, why it's necessarily
Well,
need to be fluid.
I asked that question because it seems pretty basic, but I got to tell you, a lot of boards aren't good at that. They're not good at saying to the community why this money is important and what's going to probably be sacrificed if we don't pass this levy, and what the board's going to try and really do if we do pass this levy.
Well, let's do a real life example. November 3rd, renewal. It's worth $5.7 million of revenue. If we're not successful, what gets cut?
Well, I think in the past, we've never tried to govern by fear or threat,
Right.
because I don't think our community responds
Right.
super well to that.
Good.
Like if we said, hey, we're going to cut busing down to state minimums,
Right.
we'd have people go, okay. Like that, I don't know that the threats really inspire people one
No,
way or
and I'm not
another.
talking about,
Like the
I'm
list
not
of
talking
cuts that
about a
some
threat.
places
I
do.
totally agree with you.
And the
But
other side of that is if we didn't cut busing to state minimum, we said we were going to, people would be so mad.
you are totally 100% right. So,
We've been down that road before. I think we've learned from mistakes.
And I hope you know that my statement there was rhetorical. I didn't want specific
No,
bullet
yeah.
points.
so I'm not talking about threats, but when you decide as a board to put a renewal on the ballot or a new money levy on the ballot, you have a lot of conversations about the millage that you're going to ask for. And the theory is that you're asking for a certain amount of millage for a certain reason, right? It's not pie in the sky kind of pulling numbers. And so to the extent possible, I just hope that you, and it sounds, Kathy, your response tells me that you try and do this, that you are thoughtful
I
about,
think we can do better on this, Cheryl.
yeah.
I think this is an area we could do better.
I think it's, again, it's not empty promises and it's not threats, but it's, the money only goes so far. And if we don't get this renewal, we will have to make a decision between doing this or this. We will have to have serious conversations about our ability to add this curriculum that the community wanted or this. And I think that's fair. I think it's a fair conversation for you to have as a board. It's a scary conversation because you talked about, geez, if we say we're going to cut busing and then we don't cut busing, or my gosh, I'll never forget I can't even remember which district it was that made all kinds of, said we're going to slash this, that, and the other, and then the levy didn't pass, and lo and behold, they found some money that, what we don't want is for you to lose credibility, but I think it's fair for you to have honest conversations with your community about what the resources will get you.
Can I say something?
Sure.
I think that the partnership with the community end of it, I wasn't on this board, obviously, but the partnership with the community end of that communication issue has been strong, especially with the big levy, right?
Yeah.
The frequently asked questions and those kinds of things. I think that has been addressed well, at least within the partnership with the community, so.
So you felt as a community member prior to being a board member, pretty well informed about.
Well, I also helped. I volunteered to help
Sure.
with that levy, but conversations I had with people in the community who were not plugged in, so to speak, made it easier for me as a community member and not a board member to be able to say to them, this is what's going to happen, right? Or to point them to places they could go to get the information they needed quickly and easily. So
Good.
Again, just the partnership with the community end of it, I think was strong.
Critical probably to the passage.
I think we've done a better job of that in the more recent years. And I think that's an area that we focused on and are trying to improve.
Well, and sometimes your renewals will be about general operating and there won't be a specific purpose, which is why Chrissy's reports or Dr. Nichols' reports to you on Friday, you said the Friday report in the detail is also important. But if all of you have access to information so you can address a community member that wonders what his tax dollars are doing, that's the best thing. Okay, so this is kind of a continuation about this. Based on your focus area of resources, what has the board specifically discussed to increase understanding in the community about district finances? So does the board have actually any activities other than your board meeting? Because Christy gives a treasurer's report. Do you have a business advisory council or a finance committee?
Both.
Good, you have both. So that's good. Those are two really good things. And does the board make appointments to that committee?
Yes.
Yes. Good. So there's another check mark in your governance calendar. So, and then, the informal opportunities as well as the formal opportunities to talk about district finances. So anytime the board shows up, if you show up at a choir concert or you show up at a science fair or a technology festival or something like that, if there is an opportunity for you to point to something that has been, that the district's been blessed with as a result of the community support, make sure you can do that. So we're going to talk a little bit. I'm going to skip this one on Black Tiger Family because we're going to talk about communication here in just a little bit. We talked about security, an annual facilities audit. Christy talked about that. Todd talked about that as well. I want to get to accountability here. District accountability is the fourth governance area. Commitment to continuous improvement in student achievement in each school building. So that was one of your focus areas, student success and also communication. Talked about being more consistent with communication across all school buildings and all levels. Evaluating the superintendent and treasurer and measuring student achievement on valid assessments. So we talked a little bit about data. Do you believe the tools used in the discussions you have related to the treasurer's and superintendent's goals and evaluation are appropriate and aligned? So since you got your new strategic plan, have you realigned the way you're doing superintendent and treasurer evaluation to that new strategic plan?
Well, we have, I think. We do our evaluation, and then we come together as a board to speak to one another. And then Karen, usually she's the president, she'll set down what we've all said and combine it into a report to give to Todd or Christy. And then they have a chance to answer anything that we have questions or what. And then we will meet with them another time. So to me, it's worked a lot better than when I was first on the board, where we just were, right. And then it was just given here. And there was really not much of the discussion part as much as I wanted. So I think that's a lot better
Okay.
system.
So to your point, does the board utilize a calendar to determine performance priorities and evaluate the superintendent treasurer? So when you are doing in August, before you update goals, SMART objectives and all that kind of thing, does the board also at that point talk about specific performance objectives for the coming year for the superintendent and the treasurer?
We usually discuss expectations in July when
Okay.
we have our end of year evaluation. And we talk about really two components then. One, the strategic plan goals, and the other, the state standards for superintendent evaluation.
Okay, good. So you do that in the summer.
We do that in the summer,
Good.
and as part of that conversation, then we identify areas for focus for the upcoming school year.
Great.
And
So,
there has been mid-year conversations as well, more formative conversations
Perfect.
at mid-year. I'm going to hand you this. This is our end of year document.
okay.
Okay, about 66 pages long. We had 2 executive sessions.
Next
with
time
the
I
board.
have insomnia, I'll.
I don't expect you to read it. I'm just showing you that we had 2 executive sessions that were specifically going through that and the goals preparing for the next school year.
Great. No,
As part of
seriously,
the
I
evaluation.
seriously will enjoy looking through this.
Because we
Um,
evaluate in particular Todd a lot off of that because we
Yes.
say, okay, so such and such department set these 3 goals, and it looks like they didn't meet any of them. Okay, superintendent, how were you driving this conversation? What did that look like? At what point did you realize they weren't meeting the goals? When did you, and we have that. And then when we say, hey, this building met all of their goals and exceeded them. Okay, tell us more about what they did. How can we bring that up to the district level and translate that, make sure everybody has that sort of
Perfect.
capacity.
So going back to that conversation you have in July where you set out some performance objectives and you say, we'd like to see improvement here and more focus there. And do you as a group of 5 and with your superintendent or treasurer talk about priorities? So if you say, these are the 4 or 5 performance objectives we'd like you to focus on this year, does he have a clear notion about how those are ranked?
Maybe not.
Do you?
I don't know.
We'll ask him, do you?
I don't know.
Or should we do a better job?
I find that that's kind of a
I don't
missing
think we do.
link.
Yeah.
That's a missing link, and it's an easy thing to miss. because again, Alex and Karen may feel really strongly about 2 and 3, and Kathy and Anthony like 1 and 5, and Todd thinks, the whole board thinks, if I don't do anything else but except number 2, I'm golden, right? So have that conversation about not only the performance objectives, but how the board sees their priority.
Well, I will share a little bit that the board has made it very clear that they wanted to hear more from College Career Readiness, that team. And they made that very, very clear. And so the presentations at board meetings have increased substantially. CCR now meets on a weekly basis as opposed to an every other week basis. There is a lot more detail in their Friday notes with regard to what's happening in college career readiness, inclusive of, depending on how deep they want to dig, there's links to just about everything that's taking place in the district. There is nothing that's really taking place that they wouldn't have the opportunity to know. So they've made that clear, and so we've made it clear, to our folks. And I'm not shy with our administrators that this is a team operation, and it goes both ways.
Sure.
It's from Board of Education to our administrators to our classrooms and back up.
So you mentioned, I was just thinking of a conversation. I had a brokered a conversation between a board member and a superintendent one day, kind of informally, and they weren't seeing eye to eye, and the superintendent obviously felt like he was, I can't even remember what the conversation was all about, but at one point the board member said something that I've always remembered. He looked at the superintendent and he said, I don't expect you to do everything, but I expect you to get everything done.
Well,
and so it's some of that,
Yeah.
it's some of that accountability. And Anthony's writing that down.
Also, no, I think we've said that.
So
That's pretty true.
I appreciate that you were able to say, the board made it really clear what the expectation was, and then you were able to energize in whatever way, shape, and form that was, that committee to
Well,
provide
in
that.
terms of how the board evaluates me, I evaluate our administrators in the same fashion.
Sure.
Those goals
As-
that are
as you
in
should.
there,
As you should, right?
along with OPES or whatever else whatever document that we have to use, just as they use OSES and strategic plan in that document to evaluate me, I do the same with our administrative team.
Sure.
And the piece of
Brian can
evaluation
confirm.
for both of them that we do really well, I think, is we wanted to take the adversarial accusation that you
Yes.
don't do this piece out.
Right.
And so we never say anywhere in our evaluations that they don't do something. We phrase it as a question. So let's say there's an area in the superintendent's thing, and we just say, I don't think we heard much from Todd about this year. So we'll phrase it as a question. We'll say, can you tell us more about how you do blank? So we always assume from the positive that he's doing this thing that is expected of him, but we just haven't heard about it.
That's awesome.
And I think that's something that every board could do better about, because I think it's that adversarial piece of evaluations where people brood on the negative, and that's what their takeaway is going to be.
So you have, when you come together, Patty, you were talking about the conversation that you all have, and you blend your conversation and you have a conversation with your administrator. And then does the board president, do you write a memo to the file or something that just says, we've completed the evaluation, these are what we would like the focus to be next year, et cetera, comes from the board?
Yes,
One document?
yes.
Okay. Your individual documents aren't all attached?
No.
Good.
I think it's also beneficial too, because we frequently in the past have had community members request copies of evaluations, and oftentimes it's utilized for fodder more than it is for anything else. So I think when they see the board united in saying, this is what we really appreciate about you, this is what we
Sure.
think you're doing well, and here's some questions that we continue to have. There's not something that they can take that's detrimental, if you will, to any person. It's just saying, this is what's happening and this is
Well,
what you're
it's-
doing.
That's important. That's really important that the community sees that any decision the board made about an evaluation was a board decision.
Right.
And not an individual decision. So that's really key. It's also important for all of you, the 5 of you, to be able to advocate for the superintendent or to critique the superintendent in an honest way and know that your name's not going to be attached to whatever it is. So because it shouldn't be. You are evaluating the board, the superintendent and the treasurer as a board. So all 5 of you participate. And then Dr. Nichols, you said the process includes informal, informative along the way, which I think is really important. So when a board sits down and Karen, in August, you decide what those performance objectives are going to be and the priority for those. And it's clear what that priority is. And then guess what? We have a COVID pandemic. And the 2 things that you told Todd you really wanted him to focus on this year are things that in the COVID reality weren't as critical. It may go without saying, but still I think those formative evaluations are just really important so that by the time you come to next May or June, no board member is surprised that the priority for the board was totally ignored for what probably was a very good reason in the past year.
And I would submit our board's a very active board, so those informal conversations happen frequently.
I don't know, I'm trying to read between the lines here. Okay, so
If
now we're
he
gonna
keeps
get to
talking, they'll
this.
happen more frequently.
I'll bring in more articles too.
This is the area where you all said you think you can do better. And it sounds to me like you're doing a lot. Just creating the strategic plan was a huge thing. Passing your levy, a huge community engagement effort, et cetera. But the 5th standard is engagement of community members. So collaborating with families and responding to their diverse interests and needs. Diverse interests and needs, that's especially in COVID, that's true. Superintendents have been telling us for months now, any decision I make, I'm loved by half my community and reviled by half my community, right? So
It's true.
it's really difficult. You cannot please all the people, and we're finding out in these last few months that that's certainly true. But you do have to ensure transparency and ensure global communication. So what I mean by that is lots of different platforms and making sure everybody gets your message. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And then getting input from your staff and community. I was talking with a superintendent a few months ago, and he said he's gotten in the habit on there. I think he does it through Facebook or maybe it's Twitter. Puts out a question to the community every week or 2, and just asks for responses. And it can be a kind of a nonsense thing or not a big thing, or maybe it's a big thing, but putting things out to elicit that feedback from the community is important too. So I want you to talk to me about your minis. So think about the Cuyahoga Falls community at large. And if you had to slice it and dice it into community groups, specific community groups, what would some of those be? If I said, what are your stakeholder groups? Tell me what your key stakeholder groups are.
Senior citizens.
Okay, good one.
I think the village is its own stakeholder. They have their own so we have most of the city of Cuyahoga Falls and then all of the village of Silver Lake.
Okay.
And the village is very tiny and they are their own.
They see themselves, they have their own culture.
Yes.
Okay, so we have the village.
We have parents.
Parents, right? So active students and their parents. What else?
Well, we have like the east side,
Yeah.
which is over by Price and Preston and Sill. And then we have the west side, which
Okay,
Kathy and I grew up in the east side, which
Hey, me too.
I don't want to say it was poorer, but
It is.
it was more
demographic.
economically challenged.
Yes.
And so, there was a little.
So you have
that
east
way.
side and west side.
Mhm.
Okay, what else?
We have young adults with no children.
Okay, that's a great one, and that's an easy one to miss.
Mhm.
Young adults, no children. Do you have active military here? I mean, like significant? Do you have a,
Not significant.
Okay.
Not significant, but we have a purple star building.
Mhm.
do you have significant population? In my community, we have significant Muslim community. Do you have a significant religious community? Do you have a Jewish school or a Jewish?
There's one in Fairlawn, but.
We have a growing population of Bhutanese.
There's,
Nepali.
yeah, the
Okay, Nepali and Bhutanese. So
Yes.
that's important to keep an
Mhm.
eye on.
Mhm.
So what I always think can really help boards that want to be better at communication and community engagement is to talk about your minis, all those populations. And what are the PR or communications vehicles you use that resonate with each of those best? I always say, let's talk about your district website. Your district website is really good. But who looks at it? Current parents,
Staff member.
staff members, nosy people like me. But I'm going to say that your young families without children, your retirees, those in assisted living, et cetera, probably aren't looking at your district website. So you need to think about the Bhutanese community, right? How are they getting information about the school district? What are the ways that would be most welcoming for them to get information from the school district? For some people, Facebook and Twitter is all you need to do, but not for a lot of people. So think about how our message, take the mountain to Muhammad and ask Muhammad to bring the mountain to you, or whatever is that cliche. You have to do it both ways. And it's important to have a conversation every year about your communication plan. And now that you have a staff member specifically who's going to help you do that, that's a luxury. That is a really great thing for you to have. And I would encourage the board to be very involved in conversations with that person and with your superintendent about the minis in your community. So those young parents that are thinking about having children that will be your preschool students in 5 or 6 years, you want to become friends with them early on and make sure that they're getting information about your school district. So and then my last point here is there a specific assignment for the board in this area? I think it's a healthy thing for you to talk about how you are interacting with your community outside of the board meeting. So do you make specific assignments as a board about who's going to attend different school functions or different things? Do you talk when Superintendent Nichols says, just want to make everybody aware that this is happening next week or this is happening next month? Do you talk as a board about which of you is planning on attending?
We don't. We work hard to keep track of all of our school events and parent-teacher events and so on, and do our best to attend as many as possible. We don't ever divide them up, like you take the choir concert, you take the football game. But at any given point in time, you'll find at least one, if not 2, 3, 4, or 5 of us at just about everything.
I'm sure that that's true. And I don't think you should divide it up because then it makes it seem more like duty. But I think it's great to say, thanks for mentioning that. I'm planning on attending that. Have it on the record,
Okay.
that one or more of you is going to be there.
Okay.
Or 3 of you, or whatever it is. I know that you probably all talk about the fact that you attended the spring musical, or wasn't it fantastic, the spring musical, or
We do.
invention convention, or whatever that
We do.
is after it happened. So that's good too. But if you're planning on being at things as the superintendent mentions them or you all mention them to each other, make sure it's on the record that you're going to be there.
How many of us are going to the fall play then? Let's do that now.
I don't think we can go.
We can do it virtually.
Yeah, we
can't
can.
we?
Yeah.
That's what I meant. And that's
Okay.
what's going to
Yeah.
happen
Sure.
because these restrictions are in place. I think we have to mention, hey, I'm catching the virtual whatever of the fall play. That just came out,
Yeah.
when, today?
Yes.
And we'll get more information, but you're right. And even these people are saying, hey, there are restrictions, so we want you to be informed and plan accordingly.
Right. And once we are back to where we can all be communal again, which we all hope is going to happen, I hope that you all will talk about ways to meet your community members outside of the board meeting again. How you can do that.
I think one of the most impactful things, and I don't even know why I brought it up at the last board meeting as something tangentially to something else, but just how our buildings look from the outside and what the school sign says carries a lot of weight, especially to these groups like senior citizens and
Absolutely.
without kids that are never going to enter that school.
Uh-huh.
They will create an impression or a perception of what that place is about just from looking at a school sign that still says school opens August 22nd
Right.
and it's October 1st.
Right.
It is attention to detail, is, what is this place about? Same with maintenance guys. They understand that how they keep that building up is the grass mowed, are the weeds high in the flower beds, or, creates a perception.
Absolutely.
Are we taking care of community resources? We're asking folks for funds to support these facilities, and once we have them, are we taking care of them? And I think folks underestimate the value that folks like our lawn crew and so on has to the district in creating our image that we care about the things that you've given us. And we want to take good care of those. We want to take pride in those. And the same with the signs. I mean, that's probably one of my kinds of things because I hang with the senior citizens who don't get into the buildings. And that's how their perception is created. And unfortunately, sometimes it's those small things that can make a difference in someone thinking that you're attentive to detail or you disregard it.
You care that we know what's going on in your building, So I think those are great points. Okay. All right, so here, you've talked about how, the boards come together. Your superintendent gave you credit at the beginning of this meeting about how you've come together. So I want to ask you now whether you believe that the community perception of this board and the work that you're doing, the board governance work you're doing has improved. Are you better off or worse off or the same, do you think, in your community's perception this year than maybe 2 or 3 years ago?
I think if we took COVID out of the mix, I'd say better. We have a high degree of visibility in our community. I think we have a high degree of transparency in our work. Our treasurer worked to devise a system to clearly communicate how the emergency levy funds were being spent according to the plan. A lot of those pieces are in place, but I think with the COVID, folks are either really upset that we aren't all in school or really upset that we're partially in school or just really upset. And I understand it from all angles. So, are they happy with this? I think some of them are in that regard, but some of them also think that we're spending money foolishly by having, kids distanced and partitions and so on, because, that's really unnecessary. Or we're spending money unnecessarily having remote learning and so on, because that's all unnecessary. And it's,
Mm-hmm.
you know, everyone has a
Your own
perception
opinion.
of,
Sure.
and so it just makes it difficult. You know, we're trying our best to do the right thing, to do the safe thing,
So
to
that's
be
my
careful.
question. Even if they don't agree with your decisions,
Mhm.
would you say that your community would say that you're trying your best to make decisions that are in the best interest of children? That the five of you are working together better than maybe has happened in the past to make decisions in the best interest of children? Would it be common, would it be unusual for me to hear a community member say, I may not agree with the decision they made, but they looked at the right kinds of evidence, they listened to experts, and I think they made the call that they thought was best for our kids?
I would hope they would, but our whole country is divided, and I think that plays in everywhere now. And to me, it's very difficult. So I'm not sure. I don't know. But
I think there's a growing sense of that. Are we there? Probably not. But I think we're more there than we used to be. We're more there than even when I came on the board, which I'm not taking credit for. But I think just gradually over the years we get more there. So
yeah, I think COVID it's a, you know,
It's just been
It's hard.
absolutely brutal.
very,
And there is no right answer
exactly.
for every family and for every child. And you know, we want what's best for our kids, and we want to provide the best education, but we also want our teachers to be healthy and our staff to be safe and our kids to be healthy and safe. So it's a balancing act, and all you can do is the best you can do, and be willing to pivot, right?
Mhm.
And I was talking with your superintendent before we started about the sort of red, yellow, purple, orange, and you know, that changes like almost on a weekly basis. And it's very difficult to make those kinds of decisions. And so I don't envy you.
They're finding that hard to give themselves credit. But the reality is, when you go into our community, you don't hear as much about the board being divided.
Right.
That, whether they support the decisions or not, or whatever, but you don't hear, I don't hear in a business community, people pulling my ear about division amongst the board. That has subsided
And that's kind of
substantially.
my question.
And they
Right?
need to give themselves credit for that.
I think I was going to say, if anyone in the community is angry, at least they're angry with all of us. And that's that's kind of a wonderful place to be, you know,
Yeah.
because they now, like you both are saying, they see that we're working together. And I think that's beneficial for everyone. I mean, it certainly helps Dr. Nichols and the people we employ
Sure.
to know that we're either going to say as a board, no, we're having trouble with that, or boy, we're behind you 100%. And they can't go after individuals to try to get their own way. They know that we'll stand together.
That's an excellent point. So you answered my question on behalf of the board, which is good. So yeah, whether, you know, I always said, if you're transparent and you are making decisions based on evidence, based on your goals, which you're doing, you're hearing evidence on every 2 weeks from your superintendent about progress and things. You're asking experts, teachers and curriculum experts, et cetera, to present to the board. If you're making your decisions based on real evidence, your strategic plan, the will of your community, not everybody will always agree with you, but they will always respect you. And they may not be honest about that, but it's true. I mean, I think even when people disagree with you, they will respect the way that you went about doing your work. And that's all you can do. That's all you can ask for as a board.
I think there's more of a willingness to compromise too.
Right.
I think we all understand that if you're one and if you get two other people to agree with you, that's 3 votes, and for most things that can roll the day. But I think we've all come to value more, how can I give a little to this person to get them to feel that this is a good idea too? And we've done a lot of that.
I think so
It's what makes our meetings longer sometimes, because instead of just saying all 3 people agree with this, that's what's going to be. We try to take the time to say, how can everybody get on board with this? What's it going to take? And we've asked that question to each other.
Right.
What would it take to get you to support this? And is that something the rest of us feel that we can accommodate? And if so, we try to do it. And I think
That's good, yeah.
I think that's been important. I think where COVID's hurting us is because we're out and about so much and people see us usually, and they have those opportunities to grab us and ask us a question or do that. And because we can't do that now, it's creating that division between it's us and them. And then I think the frustration builds up. So by the time somebody reaches out, they're so angry and so upset. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't be about whatever they are upset about, because they didn't have the opportunity to ask you that question 3 weeks ago when it was just starting to bubble up, which they usually do because we're out and about and we get stopped out and about. We've all, I would say our community knows who we are, whether we like it or not.
Well, your point, Anthony, about finding consensus rather than just saying, well, I know Karen and Patty will be on my side, so who cares about Alex and Kathy on the other end? We could just do it and get it done with a 3-2, who cares? Your investment in finding the way to get to 5 is, you all know this, that it will pay off in the long run. And that work to get to 5 will make 5 much more automatic down the road, right? Your meetings will get shorter, I promise. So that in itself is a huge, huge lesson for boards. And you're also right that COVID has made everybody feel very insulated and very isolated. And that reaching out is harder. You have to be much more creative to make people feel connected. And I think, Kathy, to your point, and Anthony, you mentioned it too, people are just really frustrated. And the board's an easy target. So anything that you can do, and I'm really glad to hear from your superintendent that he's not hearing that kind of feedback that maybe you heard in the past. So we've talked about some of our challenges. So I want to talk a little bit about your mission statement about each child. So my question, it seems simple, but why is it so difficult for districts to really serve each child? And see if you have any thoughts about that, and whether the solutions that you've talked about or the gaps that you've acknowledged, sort of mitigating, and maybe it's not even fair until we're through COVID to have this conversation. But I guess I would just ask you to continue to think about it, whether or not, we all know that there are achievement gaps, but I think as a board, having conversations about what they're attributable to, is it socioeconomic, is it instruction, is it, whatever it is, and begin to have the conversations about mitigating it, is a very valuable thing from a board governance perspective.
I think something that's kind of funny, but not really, is that the virtual learning presents different challenges. And in Oregon, I will say that this happened in Oregon. One of my relatives is teaching, and the child that they're teaching turns off the lights in their house and says, "I'm sorry, my power went out, so I can't continue this lesson." I mean, there are little things like that are part of that second question. That's just a little snippet of one of the challenges that we face. There's a bigger ball of wax that we need to address, but now those types of things are happening. You have the kid who spins in their chair the whole lesson, or goes to get a snack and they miss instruction as they're coming back. So those are the little challenges that are in addition to some of the challenges that we already
They're huge
face.
challenges, and that's why I said this conversation, obviously we have to take COVID into consideration. But the gap, if I asked you, if I was here last October and we were having a conversation about the achievement gaps, we'd have a lot different conversation about the issues than we're having now. And the issues you have now with remote learning and children's access to Wi-Fi and, you know, whatever else, all of those kinds of things, it's very different now. But as a board, your continuing conversation on a very regular, if not every meeting basis about something that we're doing to either understand our gap and address our gap in even if they're small but meaningful ways is really important to your goal of reaching each child.
I think it's hard because everybody is different and unique.
Yep.
Everyone. And we can't stereotype them into one group either. You have to look at each person as that unique little person that we can educate and
Right.
go from, and that's hard because there's so many.
Right.
But
And, you know, that role really does fall to our teachers. You know, they're the people on the ground and in the classrooms and in their living rooms that are trying to do that.
I would also say that Cuyahoga Falls has changed and is continuing to change and becoming much, much more diverse. And the board has supported our work with regard to integrated comprehensive systems for equity with Dr. Elise Fritura and Dr. Capper from University of Wisconsin. And Elise actually grew up here in Cuyahoga Falls. But, and using that as a foundation, multi-year approach, as a foundation for really examining everything that we do through a lens of equity. You know, making sure that our students have equitable access to high quality instruction, period. And so there's a lot of, the board has a lot of support for that work that we've engaged in. And that came after at least 2, maybe 3 years of work with regard to diversity, intentional or bias, and trauma, you know, and taking a look at our students and having our staff really take a look at their own implicit biases, I should say, and so built that amongst the staff. Really shared how our demographics have been changing, and now we're at a place where I think people, at least from our first sessions, the comments that we received from our first sessions in ICS for Equity are off the charts. So, and that kudos to the board for supporting our work with regard to wellness and
That's
Mm-hmm.
success
pretty
in that
exciting
area.
work.
Huh?
That's exciting work.
It is exciting work.
Has your staff embraced, for the
We are
most
at-
part, that kind of?
We're at the place where it's our district leadership team now taking it down to building leadership teams. Okay. And so it'll roll out full scale from our building leadership teams to the rest of our staff this spring. But like I said, it's a multi-year approach.
Do you do book studies here? Yeah?
Once we get through our 800
Yes,
pages of policy. No, we are, Cheryl.
We're
actually
going to.
starting next month.
Yeah. We are.
Good.
The book that this board has chosen is Focus by Mike Schmoker.
I don't know that one.
Well, we can get you a copy.
You can,
Along with the strategic plan.
so that was, I mean, it was something that we started at the beginning, right
Uh-huh.
before COVID really
Yeah.
hit. And we had the best intentions of doing it throughout the summer and all this and that. And then, you know, our priorities changed.
Sure. Sure, but that's a great thing to do
Survival,
as a
but-
district, as a board, et cetera. So-
Alex brought his copy.
We're back in it now. We're back at it. We have administrative and board teams. And, I mean, it's gonna be-
Yeah, that's what's really interesting. Say it, Anthony.
It's board and admin together.
Yes.
So everybody who's on an administrative contract, as well as the board, has to do it. And then there's 5 cabinet level administrators, so each of them is partnered with each of us. And then we have 4 to 5 other administrators. And so we have I think we each have like twice that our group has to actually meet, summarize everybody's feedback, and come back and kind of present it to the board at a meeting.
Good for you.
So
That's
what's
awesome.
really cool about that, and that, I'm really proud of them. What's really cool about that is you take a book like Mike Schmoker's Focus, okay? It's very academic, very academic. And who do we have reading it as well? Food service, transportation, buildings and grounds, technology, everybody. And it's the board and the admin team. And I included in my administrative instructional council every month, a review of that. So that's, kudos to the board for forcing that issue, and kudos to my administrative team. We're all on the same page.
Good for you. Well, I hope you enjoy it. Sounds like light reading.
It's not difficult.
Okay, so I want to wind up with going back to the board's true function. Is to set the goals for the district, and to monitor progress on the measurable strategy. So you are meeting the mandate. The mandate set for you by the state, the mandate set for you by the Ohio Revised Code, et cetera, and to ensure that the goals remain the overriding priority. Again, if you learn to speak in language that directly links everything you're doing to those focus areas and to your mission, you will do that. And I guarantee you it will become really natural for you. So I think that in my putting this presentation together, your conversation, your new strategic plan, I think that the assessment that I would give your board is a really positive one. And there aren't many gaps, at least from this presentation, or things that you aren't at least addressing. You seem to have a great handle on the things that you are less good at. And you also are understanding the things that you're getting better at. I think there have been several times, though, tonight that you maybe haven't given yourself enough credit, but I find that you are very willing to give credit to your administrative staff and your teachers, which is awesome. I really appreciated some of the comments that you made about the work that you've done to come together as a board, and that I may not always agree with Anthony, but we're finding ways to have conversations. And it sounds to me like you are doing a really good job at asking questions in a way that's really direct and really explicit, but not personal, right? So when you need something from your superintendent or your treasurer or another board member, you're finding ways to phrase a question or a request in a way that is appropriate and professional, which sounds really good just based on the conversation that you've shared with me tonight. So what commitments can we make moving forward? Is there a district goal or goals that we want to commit more time to understanding and promoting? I think that you should have that conversation. And again, it goes back to the priority of when you're talking as a group of 5, being very clear with your community and your administrators about what your priorities are. Does one of our core commitments merit more attention? Is there a board standard that we feel needs more attention than another? That may be the communication one, and maybe those ongoing conversations about working with your superintendent and your new communications director will be really valuable to you. So in terms of a score sheet, I just put the assessment standards that we use for boards across the top because I'm a visual person. I'm pretty clear on visual. And then I put your 4 goals down the left side. And if you look back at this presentation when you're talking and you look at the points that are contained under each of those standards, what good governance means, what communicating high expectations means, et cetera, and then analyze it in light or tie it and reflect to those 4 goals. And I would, I'm not a big numbers person. I'm not a big, 1 through 5 rubric numbers person, because I always say, I know Kathy's going to be a really tough grader and Karen's going to go easy on me. And so what's a 3 to Karen and a 5 to Kathy is very different. But if you can have a conversation and say, let's just talk about everything that we're doing in the culture of caring as a board, how the board is supporting the culture of caring goal through the lens of those five standards. I mean, I would say you're all really on the right track. I'm really, it's not my right to be proud of you, but I am proud of you on the work that you're doing. So, but I like looking, and same with the superintendent evaluation, treasurer evaluation. I always say, just take their standards across the top. You talked about using the Ohio superintendent evaluation. It's basically this, taking the standards across the top and the goals along the left side and talking about where they all come together. So I would just leave you, this is one of my favorite quotes from a guy that lived a long dang time ago. And maybe the roots are tasting a little bit more bitter now than they have in the past. But I do think that the work you're doing on behalf of your students is going to generate lots of good fruit. So are there any other questions or comments?
No, but thank you for helping us understand.
I hope that, I
And give
really
us
hope
that
that you can walk away from this feeling good about the work you're doing, because based on the way OSBA would ask boards to self-evaluate and the standards that we would ask you to abide by and work toward, you all are doing a bang-up job. So just keep at it. Okay?
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time and
You're very
giving
welcome.
us your attention this evening. We sure do appreciate it.
And thanks for this copy.
Who
I'm
knows?
gonna show it off. You think I'm kidding? But
Who
I
needs Advil
You
PM?
should look at Karen's copy.
I always carry it, so if you, no.
She needs a copy of
I
Todd's
fully
notes.
expected that you did.
Only because I took it out.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, so welcome. Thank you.
I hope you all stay healthy.
Yes, you too.
Thank you. You do the same.
Mhm.
I'm thinking, just as a final comment, and I'd like to hear the rest of your thoughts. I'm thinking we probably should put on our next
Ryan, could you help
agenda
her?
a couple executive sessions to talk about prioritizing
Mhm.
the goals that we set for Dr. Nichols and Ms. Stoykoy, and also to give us an opportunity to review with Dr. Hall those instruments that we finished up last spring before his arrival, bring him up to speed on those. What are your thoughts on that?
Have we given him a copy of the evaluations we did just this past summer? Because
No,
that would be
we could do that
helpful.
then. Yeah, we
Because
could do that
that's
before.
where we talk about a lot of our priorities is through that document.
We'll
So
get those to
that
you.
might help him.
I think now we will help you or help us refresh what we discussed a few months ago so that we can focus on what we as a board feel those priorities should be. So
Okay,
it would be beneficial.
we'll get those to you and we'll plan on doing that. Great, thank you for your thoughts. Ready for a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Roll call, Ms. Stoykoy.
Who was the first? Sorry, I didn't hear who was the first.
Patty.
Jeez, Christie, who else?
I think it was Kathy. But
I didn't
then
hear
again,
much
it was the second
discussion.
I didn't hear.
It was Patty and then Alex.
Oh,
So
well,
it
then I
should
was
say
telling
Whitehall.
There you go.
Ah,
All right.
you. Ms. Dr. Hall, Ms. Moffitt,
Aye.
Ms. Schofield,
aye.
Ms. White,
Aye.
Mr. Gomez.
Hi.
Thanks, Christy.
Thank you.
Thanks.
See you
Christie.
tomorrow?
Yep.
All right.